Hello and welcome to week 11 in social psychology. This week we're going to be looking at chapters 20 and 21. Chapter 20 on helping and pro-social behavior and chapter 21 on cooperation. So let's just jump. Of course you can see those are related, so there's actually a lot of crossover between those two contents. So let's take a look at chapter 20 here and introduce this with some quotes that I got on altruism. And, I like great ways. You'd have a Kerouac saying, practice kindness all day to everybody, and you will realize you are already in heaven now. Great comment there. And we go into kind of what we're examining in terms of social psychology is the two factors. What is it about the situation, and what is it about you and your personality that leads to altruism and pro-social behavior? And we examine the different models that are out there. So we start off looking at the context. Where is the helping opportunity happening? And the book starts off with some classic psychology experiments that were done in terms of understanding the impact of other people being present on an individual's response to help somebody in a crisis. And in experimental situations, what they found out when, everybody was in on it except for the one person, this is one of those tricky experiments. Somebody fakes a crisis or something, and then the individuals who's being studied is in the room with other people, and they time how long it takes for that individual to respond. Nobody else is going to respond. They're just waiting to see if this person is going to respond. And what they found out was the more people that were present, the longer it took for the person to respond. And they theorized that there was this diffusion of responsibility. Someone goes into a crisis and there's people around, and there's 10 units of response, that are out there in the air now, 10 units of response related to who's going to do something about this. And depending on how many people are in the room, it gets divided. So each individual person in the room finds themselves burdened with only a piece of the responsibility because they feel other people might have a share in that responsibility too. Now, excuse me. The other factor is of course we have that in the experimental situation, which gives us some interesting information. We also have the opposite effect very clearly demonstrating itself in the real world. So in an experimental situation, we sort of get this ratio, and we see that, and that does have an effect in the real world. But in the real world, we also see individuals immediately responding. Even though there's crowds of people, somebody gets into a distress, somebody's car catches on fire, and within seconds, one of the bystanders is over at the door, opening the door, helping them get out. And so this is it's not solid ratios of this is how many people are there. This, people in cities respond, don't respond very much at all when there's large crowds. But if in the country, they respond more because there's less. And but there's other factors as well. They come into that, and they really kind of relate to the personality of individuals. Now, the other contextual pieces in terms of response are people in the room who may be in positions of authority. The burden to respond falls on them. People who have particular roles in society, whether they're perceived by the other people or not. But if somebody's in crisis in their medical situation, and there happens to be an EMT in the room, it's very likely that the EMT will affect the speed at which somebody responds, so. And then on top of all that, there's the personalities of the individuals that are there, and the chapter goes into, what does it mean to be a helping individual? What aspects of our personality bring out altruism and the responsiveness? And we see this developmentally coming from right around the age of 3. We see the development of theory of mind. And that's the ability to recognize that other people are experiencing different things than I am. There's a separation, what Freud talked about, a separation and individuation between me and the other person. And I recognize that that individual has unique experiences. Now, that first sense of somebody else having unique experiences, one of the building blocks of what we call perspective taking. Meaning, if I've had a history where I've been in pain, but I see somebody I recognize they're in pain, but I'm not in pain. But by recognizing they are in pain, and then I remember what it was like for me to be in pain, and I project, I think I know how they feel right now, that's perspective taking. And these are the building blocks that bring us to empathy, altruism, social action. When we have this ability to see things from other people's perspective, put ourselves in their shoes per se, and then act in the way that we would have liked somebody to act if we were in that situation. A little bit of golden rule in there. And so these are the building blocks that we develop through childhood and adolescence so that adults grow up and they have pro-social behaviors. Now, a lot of philosophies have to do with having to do with personal growth and development, hinge on working with other people. And this is sort of that crossover, I guess, with the next chapter with cooperation. But we meet a lot of our needs because we are in groups of people. This is the social psychology of it. Being in groups of people, we help each other meet our needs. So I throw in, Maslow's hierarchy. And if you look at each one of these stages or each one of these places, each one of these, when you are in a family or you're in a group, are easier to attain than if you're alone. So, and to belong to a group, there's various levels of interaction. There's kind of contextually, I can say, there's I scratch your back, you scratch mine. There's I care about you, I love you, therefore I'm going to do things for you to help you on your path. There's all kinds of ways. There might be rewards. I do this and you're going to give me a reward. All kinds of ways in which you do that, but we need those groups of people that enable us to more efficiently meet our human needs. Now, we look at physiological needs, safety needs, love and belonging. Those three right there that are considered the needs that are shared among all animals. And so we see animals in groups and we see human beings in groups, and it helps us to meet our physiological needs better, helps us to meet our safety needs better, and of course, love and belonging. But even when we look at the very individual processes of developing esteem, self-esteem, and even self-actualization, esteem often is related to our perspective of others' perspective of us, the looking glass self. So we adopt a sense of ourself that is a combination of our own perceptions, but it also is mitigated by the opinions of those important people that we have in our Looking Glass Self Committee that are commenting on how well we're doing. And then finally, self-actualization, what we find, and what Maslow did, Maslow had a really, took on a really cool perspective, being one of the first positive psychologists to come along. Rather than examining individuals who were not doing well, people who were sick or dysfunctional or whatever, he examined the lives and interviewed people who were incredibly successful. He interviewed people who were self-actualized, and the pattern that he found was self-actualized people, people who had transcended to that highest level of human existence, according to his theory, achieved that through service to others. It was not an inner pathway to peace. That came along with it. But the critical part that he found consistently was a mentality of service to others. And I don't mean you're mowing somebody's lawn, although that could be it. What it is, it's that I'm not doing this for me, and that I've let go of those attachments to my own achievements, per se, and I'm doing them for the well-being of others. And when we looked at the great personalities, which is what Maslow did, we looked at all the great personalities of people that have transformed our world, he found that theme. So even in that top place, which is sort of, transcending our humanness into self-actualization, even he still saw pro-social behavior as being the pathway to that. So we see pro-social behavior, my ability to help others and care for others and be genuine coalesces my group together, and that group allows me to achieve all of my needs more efficiently. And so great part of the our realization of the importance of other people in our lives through our path. We see different pathways to altruism. I have a whole list of volunteering, service learning, teaching, comforting others, generosity, kindness, and it brings us to random acts of kindness and senseless beauty. This is a phrase that I learned in college. It was a movement on the campus to actually carry these out, and I'm going to bring that to the KVCC campus here. So we go into chapter 20's discussion with, I want you to talk about your own experiences of bystander effect, of that sense of diffused responsibility. Any examples that you come up with that? And then for the assignment, I'm actually asking you to go out and commit some acts of altruism. Go out and do something nice for somebody, preferably anonymously. And I think that there's a certain character to that. My wife and I, we purposely do this when the spirit does it. We'll be in a restaurant and sometimes we'll pay for the people's meal next to us or something like that. We can't always do this, of course, but we take these opportunities to kind of do things anonymously and we just get a warm fuzzy about it. It's really neat. So I describe an assignment and your reflection on what that was like in the course book. And so I want you to actually go out and perform a nice act of kindness, maybe 2 acts of kindness, I think, and reflect on that. It could be someone you don't know. It could be a stranger situation. It could be someone you do know. Say your partner is usually responsible for doing something, and you just, without a word, just take on. And you're kind of doing it in a way that's purely selfless. Working on that notion or experiencing that notion of doing something just because it's a nice thing to do. It's more burden on you, less burden on them, and that's it. Not expecting anything in response, not anything like that, and kind of reflecting on how that feels. Now, in chapter 21, we are looking at a similar thing, which is cooperation, which is how do people coming together work together to achieve goals. And we take a look at a bit of the psychology behind that. I start off with that movie about the Amish men moving. There's hundreds of them on the sides and underneath the barn, moving, physically picking up the barn and walking with the barn. And wow, that's a cooperative effort right there, of all people all working together in sync to get to a particular goal. Now, I start off with a little rant about Gestalt psychology, really leading to the idea that as groups, when we cooperate, we can sometimes accomplish way more than we would individually. So there's something greater in terms of the ability for a group of people cooperating than the sum of everybody's particular contribution, and they can move forward like that. It goes into the book, and the course book goes into some game theory and where that plays a role in how people study cooperation, and this idea of, are my actions self-serving or other-serving, and how am I making these decisions, and how these play out in terms of the total benefit for the set of people involved in these experiments, as a way to understand how people truly cooperate. kind of goes into group dynamics and group theory and how individuals, I know each one of you has probably been involved in a work group of some kind, and it can be very stressful when people have to cooperate. Everybody has to pull their weight in terms of making something happen and the anxiety that goes along with that. But when it happens, it's great. And when it doesn't, it's horrible. And I think as I'm recording this this segment here, it's right the day after President-elect Biden announced that he's the newly elected president. And we're really looking at a period of time in which our national leaders have been not cooperating. You know, there's been this division, red and blue division, or Democrats, Republicans, conservative, liberals, kind of thing, really moving diametrically opposed to one another. So so decisions are not necessarily bipartisan. They're like whoever's controlling the House, whoever's controlling the Senate, whatever party has the president, kind of things, rather than this cooperative approach to things. And how important it is as we're moving forward to, even though we all have strong feelings about this, I think embodied in the message of our new president is we need to stop thinking about red and blue, and we need to start working together to solve problems. And no matter your feelings on the results of the election, it's important for us to be kind to one another and cooperate. And it is what it is, and we move forward and we make strides to solve these problems. So I go into I have some resources here that there is a history of that in the legislature that sort of disappeared for a while, and then kind of a really interesting paper that was done on the fact that there are bipartisan work that goes on, but there's partisan, meaning sides, set the agenda as to what they're going to be working on, and how that has created this sort of lack of bipartisan movement within our Congress. Back to psychology, I talk about, what are some of the factors that make a group more likely to cooperate, and we can kind of look at teams this way, and particularly athletic teams in their one of the things that athletic teams and participating on athletic teams gives somebody is a very, very concrete example of a group of people sharing an identity, and that identity is to work cooperatively to achieve a goal, winning the game, or to achieve a goal, like in soccer or hockey. And so you see aspects of teams that bring people together. You have the uniforms that are all the same, so there's a sense of identity of who they are because they're all dressed alike. They have names and logos and sounds and chants, and they have their fields, and they have their emblems, and they have all of those things that create that team. And there's also established roles and hierarchies within that team, and whose job is what. And I might be the goaltender, or I might be the midfielder, or I might be the forward in a soccer team, and I have roles. But the goal of everybody is to score the goals and to win games and prevent them from scoring. And those very, very straightforward goals. And then we look at that as an example of how teams can operate effectively and cooperatively by being able to identify that unity. And maybe that's sort of like when we look at the red-blue sort of dichotomy, this is sort of the negative aspect of it too, because once you identify red or once you identify blue, it's almost like you're in competition. It's like the other team, and you're going to beat the other team. And that's great on the soccer field, but it's not good in Congress. That's not the goal of Congress. The goal of Congress isn't for the Reds to win or the Blues to win, although some might think that that's what it is. The goal is to solve problems and pass legislation. So, again, we see positive-wise, people will cooperate more if they have a sense of identity of belonging because of those aspects, both shared beliefs, shared goals, kind of thing. They'll work cooperatively together, but that also creates division with others that have their own identities with their group. Now, the chapter ends off with a discussion about common enemies or common goals, and I use COVID-19 as an example of that. COVID-19 as a universal, right now, everybody's dealing with it. Really, we're going to look at a positive end of that, was an opportunity for people to come together. And certainly that has happened. People coming together who are in disparate groups and say, okay, all bets are off. We need to work together on this. That is clearly not what has happened. That disease coming in, which has not been decimating deaths like the Black Plague or something like that, but it has been of concern to many, many people. It really is our opportunity to cooperate, to deal with this. And I think as much as there have been successes, there have been some failures. And I think this is an opportunity for us as a world to cooperate with each other to solve this problem. Now, going into the assessments here, we have a discussion. I want you to talk about common goals and enemies in the discussion. And I want you to, in the quiz, talk about when you were part of a group that became cooperative, what are the components of that group? Come up with an example. The names, the uniforms, the culture, roles, and all that stuff with the, clearly delineated roles. Stuff. It could be at work. You have a shift, a shift at work, and, you're at McDonald's and everybody has the uniform on, everybody has a role. And I've walked into a McDonald's and I watched that machine back there, that people machine is remarkable. People moving around, and it's, wow, it's really, really, ultimately to deliver that meal, they have a shared goal, and might not be the best job in the world, but jeepers, it's a really, really good example of cooperation and a team working together. And part of that is they all have the uniforms, maybe they all are in, their jobs they don't intend on staying in, and there's a certain, we're all here working at McDonald's, and I can say this because I've done it. I've been a wait staff at a fast food restaurant, and so that cohesion of that group can really create a good team. And if there's a fly in the ointment, boy, can you tell. You can tell when, and how the team can coalesce around it and say that, no, you need to pull your weight here because we all depend on each other. Very, very strong component to that. So that's the quiz, to give me an example of that, and then the discussion is to look at that, the role of common goals and enemies and your experiences with that. So I look forward to exploring these with you in the discussions, and have a great week.